There comes a moment in life when something subtle but painful starts to change. You spent decades raising your children, protecting them, guiding them, and putting them before yourself. But now, they barely ask your opinion. They interrupt. They forget to call. Or worse, they treat you like you've somehow become less important. And it hurts because deep down, you know you've earned more than this. If you've ever felt dismissed, disrespected, or simply invisible to the very people you sacrificed everything for, you're not alone. Many parents over 60 silently carry this same heartbreak. And the hardest part? You're expected to stay quiet and smile through it. But here's the truth. You don't have to argue, beg, or fight for respect. You just need to make 6 powerful shifts, each one a quiet declaration of your worth, your dignity, and your strength. Today on Golden Minds, I'm going to walk you through 6 things you can do starting now to gently but firmly change the way your children see you. Not by forcing respect, but by inspiring it. Some of these actions may surprise you. A few might even challenge you. But stay with me until the end, and you'll discover how to reclaim your place, not just in their lives, but in your own. If this message already speaks to you, comment "I'm ready" below. And don't forget to subscribe to Golden Minds so you never miss a moment of clarity, healing, and empowerment. Let's begin. 1. Withdraw your emotional dependence. Now, the first and most powerful shift you can make is this. Stop depending on your children for emotional fulfillment. That doesn't mean stop loving them. It doesn't mean becoming cold or distant. What it means is, stop tying your self-worth to how often they call, how they speak to you, or whether they make you feel seen. It's one of the hardest lessons a parent has to learn, especially in later life, but it's also one of the most freeing. I once met a man named Walter, a retired veteran and father of 3. In his younger years, he was the rock of the family, strong, reliable, always there. But after his wife passed and his kids got busy with their own lives, Walter started to feel forgotten. He waited by the phone every Sunday, hoping someone would call. He texted more than he ever had in his life, just trying to spark a conversation. And when he didn't hear back, it cut deeper than he let on. One day, after another weekend of silence, Walter made a choice. He decided he wouldn't wait anymore. He signed up for a local community woodshop class. He started going on walks with an old friend from the Army. He even began volunteering at a nearby high school, helping kids who didn't have fathers of their own. And something unexpected happened. His children started calling more often. Why? Because they sensed something had shifted. He wasn't leaning on them. He wasn't waiting for their attention. He had a life, a meaningful, full, and independent life. And they respected that. Here's the truth. When your children feel like you need their attention to feel whole, it creates pressure. And that pressure can lead to avoidance or irritation, not because they don't love you, but because they feel emotionally responsible for your happiness. But when you show them that your peace, joy, and purpose come from within, not from their approval, you shift the dynamic entirely. So start small. Pick up an old hobby, join a club, reconnect with a friend. You don't have to disappear from their lives. Just stop anchoring your value to their behavior. Because the more emotionally secure you become, the more freely they will show you love, and the more deeply they will respect the strong, whole person you truly are. 2. Set boundaries and enforce them. Once you've reclaimed your emotional independence, the next step is just as vital. Set boundaries and stand by them. Now, I know that word, boundaries, can feel unfamiliar, especially if you come from a generation where putting others first was considered the highest virtue. You were raised to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to give and give without question. But here's the truth most people discover later in life. When you don't define how you should be treated, others will decide for you, and often not kindly. I want to tell you about a woman named Joyce, a retired nurse and devoted mother of 4. For years, Joyce let her adult children speak to her in ways that chipped away at her confidence. They interrupted her mid-sentence, rolled their eyes when she gave advice, and made last-minute demands like she had nothing else going on. And because she didn't want to cause tension, she stayed quiet. She told herself, "They're just stressed. It's not worth a fight." But inside, she was shrinking. Then one day, something changed. Joyce attended a community workshop on self-respect, And the speaker said something that stuck with her. When you stay silent in the face of disrespect, you're not keeping the peace. You're losing a piece of yourself. That hit her hard. So Joyce made a quiet promise to herself. No more letting things slide. She didn't yell. She didn't scold. She simply started standing tall. When one of her sons raised his voice during a phone call, she said calmly, "We can talk when you're ready to speak respectfully." And she hung up. When her daughter made a sarcastic remark about her age, Joyce smiled gently and replied, "I've earned every year, and I expect to be treated accordingly." At first, her children pushed back. They were surprised. But over time, something shifted. They realized their mother wasn't trying to control them. She was simply choosing to honor herself. And that changed everything. Because boundaries aren't about punishment. They're about protection. They tell others, "My time matters, my voice matters, I matter." So if your children have been crossing lines, maybe it's time to draw one, not in anger, but in love for yourself. Because the moment you start requiring respect, others start rising to meet it. 3. Build a life outside of them. Once you've learned to stand tall and protect your boundaries, the next natural step is to reclaim something that many parents unknowingly lose over the years: your own life outside of them. It's easy to fall into the pattern. You pour yourself so deeply into raising your children that, somewhere along the way, you begin to forget who you were before they came along. And even after they're grown, that devotion lingers. You call often, offer help, wait for updates, and sometimes plan your entire day around the possibility of hearing from them. But here's something we don't talk about enough. When your whole world revolves around your children, they start to see you as someone who doesn't have a world of their own, and that can quietly chip away at the respect you deserve. Let me share the story of Irene, a retired librarian and grandmother of 5. After her husband passed, she poured all her time and energy into her children's lives. She checked in daily, sent long messages, offered advice, even when they didn't ask. At first, it felt like staying connected, but over time, her children pulled away. They called less, visited less. Irene felt more invisible than ever. Then one afternoon, a neighbor invited her to a local painting class. At first, she hesitated. "I haven't held a brush since college," she laughed. But something in her said yes. That one yes changed everything. She started going weekly, made new friends. She even entered a community art show. And slowly, her children began reaching out again. Not because they felt obligated, but because they were curious. "How's the painting going, Mom?" they'd ask. "Can you send me a photo of what you made?" They saw her differently now, not as someone who was waiting around, but as someone with purpose, joy, and her own rhythm. That's the magic of building a life outside of them. You remind your children and yourself that you are more than just mom or dad. You are a whole person with interests, passions, and something to say. So take the walk, join the class, plant the garden. Do something for you. Because when you fill your own life with meaning, your children won't just respect you more, they'll admire you. 4. Speak with quiet strength instead of arguing. As you begin filling your life with new purpose and joy, something powerful starts to happen. You stop feeling the need to defend your worth, and that brings us to the 4th shift. Don't argue. Lead with quiet strength. It's natural to feel the urge to push back when your children dismiss you, talk over you, or ignore your advice. You might want to remind them of all the sacrifices you made, all the love you gave, all the wisdom you still hold. But here's the hard truth. Arguing rarely wins respect. It often does the opposite. I once met a man named Harold, a retired high school principal. He was used to commanding attention in a classroom, but at home, it was a different story. His adult children often corrected him, mocked his old-fashioned ideas, and tuned him out during conversations. At first, Harold fought back. He raised his voice, listed his achievements, and tried to argue his way back into being heard. But every time he did, the distance between them grew. One day during a family dinner, his daughter interrupted him for the 3rd time. Instead of snapping back, Harold paused. He looked at her gently and said, "I'll finish when you're ready to listen." Then he folded his hands and waited. Silence filled the room. That small, calm moment changed everything. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it spoke volumes. From that day on, Harold stopped trying to prove himself. He listened more. When he did speak, it was thoughtful, confident, and without any need for approval. Over time, his children began to see him differently, not as someone desperate to be heard, but as someone worth listening to. That's the power of quiet strength. It doesn't demand attention, it earns it. So next time your child talks over you, criticizes you, or brushes you off, don't fall into the trap of arguing. Instead, take a breath. Respond with clarity, not emotion. Speak less, but with more weight. When you carry yourself with calm authority, people notice, especially your children. Because in the end, true respect isn't shouted into being, it's inspired by presence, patience, and poise. The fifth stop, rewarding disrespect. After you begin carrying yourself with calm strength, the next step becomes clear. Stop rewarding behavior that doesn't honor you. This might be one of the most difficult changes to make, because as parents, our instinct is to keep giving. Time, money, help, advice. We offer it freely, even when our children barely acknowledge it. We think if I keep giving, maybe they'll come around. But here's the truth that no one wants to say out loud. When you reward disrespect with generosity, you don't teach love, you teach entitlement. Let me tell you about Marlene, a retired bookkeeper and devoted grandmother. For years, she was always the one bailing her children out, paying bills when they fell behind, babysitting at the drop of a hat, even canceling her own doctor's appointments to accommodate their needs. But over time, she noticed something painful. Her calls were returned less and less. Her efforts weren't appreciated. They were expected. And when she finally asked for help moving heavy boxes after a minor surgery, her son replied, "I'm too busy, Mom. Can't you figure it out?" That moment broke her heart, but also opened her eyes. From that day forward, Marlene made a new rule. No more giving without gratitude. She still helped, but only when it was asked kindly. She still gave, but only when it didn't cost her peace or health. And when her children reacted with surprise or even anger, she stood firm. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about protecting her dignity. And the result? Slowly but surely, they started saying thank you. They stopped assuming. They began asking, not demanding. Because for the first time in years, they understood. Her time, her help, her love, they were gifts, not guarantees. If you've been giving endlessly and receiving very little in return, it may be time to pause. Ask yourself gently, am I being generous or am I being taken for granted? You are not a doormat. You are not a backup plan. You are a person who deserves appreciation. When you stop rewarding poor treatment, you create space for mutual respect to grow. And the people who truly care will rise to meet that standard, because they'll finally see your value for what it is: deep, rare, and worth honoring. 6. Reclaim your identity beyond the parent role. Once you stop giving out of obligation, something powerful happens. You begin to see yourself again, not just as a parent, but as a whole person. And that leads us to the sixth and final shift. Reclaim your identity beyond being mom or dad. For many of us, parenting became our life's work. We poured ourselves into it for decades. Meals, homework, birthday parties, late-night talks, sacrifices no one else ever saw. And we do it all again in a heartbeat. But when your children grow up, they don't need that same version of you. And if you keep holding on to that role as your only source of purpose, it can leave you feeling lost, or worse, invisible. Let me tell you about Darlene, a former florist and mother of two. When her youngest moved away, she felt like her world had gone quiet. She still checked in often, offered advice, sent care packages, but deep down, she felt a growing emptiness. Her kids seemed distant, distracted, and rarely asked about her life. Then one day, an old friend invited her to a local gardening group. At first, she declined. She told herself she was too tired, too busy, too out of practice. But that invitation stayed in her mind. A week later, she showed up, and something awakened. She started gardening again, not for others, but for herself. She rekindled her love for color, for nature, for creating beauty. She laughed with new friends. She felt alive. And something remarkable happened. Her children noticed. "You look so happy lately, Mom," her daughter said on a call. Tell me more about your garden. Darlene hadn't let go of her identity as a mother, but she finally stopped letting it define her completely. That's the key. You were someone before you became a parent, and you are someone still, with gifts to share, with joy to chase, with parts of you that deserve to shine again. So ask yourself, what brought you joy before kids? What dreams got put on hold? It's not too late to pick them up, because the more you step into your full self, not just as a parent, but as a person, the more your children will see you with fresh eyes, and the deeper their respect will grow. If your children have stopped treating you with the respect you deserve, know this: you're not powerless. You don't need to raise your voice, chase their attention, or remind them of your sacrifices to reclaim your dignity. You simply need to shift how you show up in the relationship and in your own life. We've talked about 6 powerful steps: withdrawing your emotional dependence so your worth no longer hinges on their approval, setting boundaries that protect your peace, building a life that doesn't revolve around waiting for their calls, speaking with quiet strength instead of arguing, stopping the habit of giving to those who don't appreciate it, and perhaps most importantly, rediscovering the vibrant whole person you are beyond the parent role. None of these actions come from bitterness. They come from self-respect, from love, and from the quiet confidence that says, I matter too. And when your children see that you carry yourself with strength, joy, and independence, they start seeing you differently. Not as someone they can overlook, but as someone they admire. So if any part of this message spoke to your heart today, leave a comment below. Tell us which action you're starting with. You never know who else your story might inspire. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Golden Minds, where we talk about the real challenges of aging with wisdom, grace, and strength. Your journey deserves to be seen, supported, and celebrated, because you're not just getting older, you're becoming more you than ever before, and that in itself commands respect.